Welcome to Kidney Health Interview. This is a place to get inspired and moved by renal warrior stories. Hi everyone, we are at Kidney Health Interview and I'm so excited to invite Calah to share her story, but also share more awareness about mental health and relationship when you're going through hardship, kidney disease, kidney transplant, and also life post-transplant. Calah, awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's awesome to be here.
You have an amazing story. So if you can share briefly where you at with your health right now.
So right now I am almost 3 years post-transplant. I will be 3 years January 10th. So that's very exciting. I'm really excited to hit that milestone and go into the next stage of my life.
This is awesome. Congrats on kidney transplant. Certainly 3 years. This is such an important part of knowing that things are under control and you're moving forward with a very healthy kidney.
Yes.
And have all the resources and health to achieve all the life goals. Also, Calah, tell me more about yourself. Where are you based? What do you do? And also, how did your kidney diagnosis begin?
Yeah, so I am from Michigan. And I currently work with a girl who has Down syndrome. And so I feel really blessed to give back after all that I've been through. My story kind of starts when I was 12 years old. I started feeling not very well. I started having some coloring issues. I started looking gray. I started my period and it was never normal. Very fatigued. And as I got older, I started getting more and more fatigued. I wanted to sleep about 18 hours a day. Just couldn't function really, to where I would get puking migraines all the time. And finally, I was working out and somebody noticed, you look really bad. And I had a breakdown finally because I felt like I was able to hide it for a long time. But long story short, I ended up having to go into the hospital. Well, actually, I changed my diet, which made me worse. And then I almost passed out in the shower. And so my mom said, I'm done with this. We're going to the doctor. And I said, I'll go to the doctor, but not the hospital. So I went to the doctor. They did labs for the first time in my life. I've never had my blood drawn until I was 20 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And that lab called me after midnight that night and said, if I were you, I would take myself to emergency right now. And so I took myself to emergency with my mom, and the emergency doctor came in after more labs were done. And he said, your kidneys are failed. They failed completely. And I just kind of looked at him and said, okay, when can I go home? And he looked at me and goes, oh, you're not going home. And I did, they did saline and all these different treatments on me. My blood pressure was skyrocketed and it wasn't getting better. And so they said, we're going to do dialysis. So I got the catheter put in my chest. I started dialysis. And then I started doing dialysis as outpatient. I got the fistula done in my arm. And I did dialysis for almost a year and a half until my grandmother, who was 67 at the time, called me and said, hey, I just want to let you know that I've been coming down there to Royal Oak to do all the testing. And she lives about 3.5 hours from where I'm at in Traverse City. Well, she was. Right now she lives with us. And she said, I've been doing the testing and I just want to let you know that I'm your match. And I was shocked, and so we set a date in January 10th of 2018. She gave me her kidney.
This is awesome. She's like superpower grandma. This is incredible.
Yes, she is.
Oh, this is, well, amazing story, but horrifying. How you got diagnosed, and amazing that you have amazing relative grandma to step in and help you to move to the next phase of your life. So this is great.
Yes.
So Calah, something just to clarify. So you mentioned that you had no idea you had any kidney disease or any predisposition, and for you it was shocking to even to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you never been in a hospital and you never been tested. Were you afraid of hospital? Was it some fear, or you just because you never been there psychologically, like, why should I be there? I'm not belong in facilities like this.
Yeah, partially because I watched my great grandparents kind of rely on medication all the time. And so it was kind of like, I'm not going to the doctors for every boo-boo that I get, you know. I really didn't realize how bad I was. And that's what the doctor said to me. But also just, I didn't go because I put myself in denial about how bad I was. You kind of go into this, I don't know, the survival mode. And even though I didn't know how bad I was then, death or anything like that was never a thought in my mind. So I never really realized how bad I was.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important to share this awareness for anyone who's a young, ambitious person and want to live their life and doesn't want
Yeah,
to even admit that disease or condition could compromise a lifestyle. So I
absolutely.
wonder, yeah, how was your, what you were thinking then? You said you tried different diets, you felt not well, but you ignored it, or have you shared with someone, someone gave you bad advice? How was it for you?
Uh, like I said, I feel like I just put myself in denial. Like I told myself, you're not that bad, or I think, from what I remember, the biggest thing that I told myself it was just, you have anemia. You have bad anemia, and like take more iron, eat more iron rich foods, and you're going to be fine. And I wasn't. I mean, puking migraines all the time, every single day. And so I would take Motrin, etc., Excedrin, Tylenol, anything to really take the edge off. And it started not taking the edge off. It was just getting worse. And I started getting symptoms that were, you know, I was having just the itching and just the clear urine and just things, you know. And I always thought, oh, clear urine, I'm hydrated, you know. Like there was just simple things that I ignored, and that was the biggest thing, is I ignored it and I thought nothing of it. I just thought it's not that big of a deal because I didn't grow up really looking to go to the doctor. So it was just like, oh, it's no big deal.
Yeah, and this is amazing, like to have so much physical and mental strength just to go over the symptoms and just holding back.
Yeah.
But what do you have to say for anyone who might be going through some symptoms or just weirdness in their health and they are frustrated whether to consult a doctor and where to start to really understanding about their, you know, weird syndromes or
Yeah,
symptoms?
I would definitely say get it checked out. Even some of my friends in my life that I've grown up with, they've said, oh, I've dealt with this issue for months. And I'm like, well, months? I think it's about time you go get that looked at, you know, because it's kind of one of those things that when you go through this, you're like, well, I don't want any of my friends or anybody. I don't care if you're my worst enemy, which I don't have enemies. But if I did, I'd be like, I still don't want you to go through any of this stuff, you know, so go get it checked out. So if I hear somebody's having, and prime example today, I'm going to get, you know, I was looking at a car today, and the car salesman actually told me that he has stage 2 kidney disease, and he showed me his arm because he itches himself in the middle of the night and wakes up with a whole bunch of, you know, holes in his arm. I was like, well, that's the phosphorus buildup, you know. And so I handed him over a nephrologist number. And you know, that's just the simple things that you can do when you hear things. You just kind of tell your story and tell people, don't become like me. If you have a possibility of ignoring and getting away from dialysis and doing different alternatives to possibly heal yourself or get ahead of the issues ahead of time, do it. You know, if I have a voice to do that, I'm going to do it.
And you're absolutely right. On one side of acting upon any constraints or concerns someone has, but also you being active advocate as a kidney patient plays such a significant role. Voice of
Yes,
renal patients, sharing the story, sharing why and how they got diagnosed makes a huge difference. And it's really amazing that when we see stats about kidney disease, that third of population under the risk developing disease and 80% or more go blindly undiagnosed to later
right.
stages. Only
Yes,
one way is really speaking about this and making people more aware of their own health so they can bring those concerns as their primary care.
absolutely. Yeah, especially since the kidney stuff was not personal to me until it literally happened to me. I had no idea about it. And the crazy thing is that I grew up around a lady. My mom cleaned for her. She was like a family member to us. She was on dialysis because she had kidney failure, and she was looking into a kidney transplant. And I was a younger kid, young teenager, and I didn't know anything about it. And then I got diagnosed with it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what she went through. And I had no idea. So it's so important to talk about it, tell your testimony, and advocate for people so that they don't have to go through what you go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. So moving on with like awareness and being diagnosed, how was your mental health going through the diagnosis of renal failure, and what did help you to gain strength to move on with the next procedures such as dialysis?
Yeah. So I think honestly, just being so transparent with people on where I was at. I was a person who always bottled stuff up. So when it came time to doing surgeries and learning about stuff, I was very open to talking about it with certain people. I remember having to get the port put in my chest, and the doctor, well, he was a surgeon, came in and started talking to me and was actually crying to me because he had gone through what I had gone through. And he was just like, your doctor is my doctor, and I see your mental state, and you're going to be fine because you're so positive about it. And again, I feel like that comes back to the fact that I have such a relationship with God. I have a relationship very closely with my church and my church family and my friends. And also just, you go into this, it's hard to explain, but it's almost like this weird third person. Like, it's not happening to you. I mean, you're seeing it, you're feeling it, but you're feeling it through another person's eyes. But every time I look at all my scars, I'm like, no, girl, that was you, you know? But you go into this just straight up, you hit just this survival mode to where you just do what you got to do to live.
Yeah, this is incredible, having faith, having support, being positively minded. It changes everything in a way.
Yes.
How you react, because it seems you were at the point where you have to react and you have to adjust immediately to everything.
It's so, you have to adapt in the snap of your fingers.
So starting dialysis and just knowing that something like this invasive will come into your body, and that you have to live with it for some time, were you resistant to it, or you just were adapting fast and like moving on?
Oh, that's a good question. I remember I accepted the port pretty easily because I was like, I got to do what I got to do to live. And I also remember my pastor came and saw me at the hospital, and he was in the meeting with my parents and my doctor, and he looked at me and said, Calah, you need to do this surgery and go do dialysis. And I said, okay. And that was like so easy for me. It was like this instant peace about it. You know, because I have faith in that. When my pastor says something, I know it's coming from God. And so it's like, I have a peace about it. However, when I started doing dialysis outpatient, and I started seeing all these people's arms with their fistulas and grafts, I flipped out because I saw how they took care of their arms, and they were massive. I mean, it looked like tumors coming off their arms. And so I was freaking out. And it didn't help that the social worker at the time was just so brutal about it. She was just like, oh, your arm's going to look like that, and you have to do this. And so I flipped out. Well, I ended up meeting with the surgeon, and I said, look, I don't want that. You know, it looks terrible. And he goes, listen, I can make it look good. He goes, and if you do this, you know, there's options. I said, well, when I get my transplant, because that's what they're talking about, I said, can I get this reversed if it inflates a lot? He goes, yes, you're going to have scarring, but I can reverse it and you'll be okay. And I said, okay. Well, then, because I was going into this world of the unknown, I had no idea about anything, you know? And so I started talking to all the nurses and techs there, and I said, what can I do to make my fistula look okay? And these people were in there for 20, 30 years, you know? And I remember this one tech, he goes, have them put the needles in a different place every single time, because that way the pressure isn't right there in that same spot every time you do dialysis. He goes, you'll have more, you know, needle scarring and stuff, but the pressure won't be in the same spot every time, so it'll look better. And also try to avoid the lidocaine numbing, because that's more needles for numbing. And so I learned these tricks. I took the big needles every single treatment without numbing, and I had them go in different areas every single time. And it became like when people were finding out they had kidney failure and they'd have to do dialysis and they'd come in to get like a tour of the place, all the nurses and techs would come over and be like, hey, can we show this patient your arm? Because I had the best looking arm. And so to this day, you know, I still had a tech one time who asked me, hey, I'm in this other facility. Can you send me a picture of your arm so I can show this younger patient that's new and freaking out and about the fistula? I was like, sure, here you go. And soon after transplant, I ended up getting it reversed because it wasn't being used. So it started hurting, but my arm looks fantastic. The surgeon did a beautiful job. I only have about an inch and a half scar, like right. It's
They want to show?
I can show you.
Oh, wow. I couldn't see it.
Yeah. So that is the scar. He went in there and he also reversed it in the same spot. And I have, you know, some scarring all the way up. It's probably about 450 needle marks, because I did dialysis with the fistula a little over a year, because I had the port for about 4 months. And I started using my fistula when I had the port in as well. But they did it off and on to make sure that the fistula was mature enough and was going to work properly. But he did such a good job. It infiltrated about twice, because of the techs, which can happen. It's life. It's part of dialysis. It's, you know, it is what it is. And my arm looks fabulous, you know, so it freaked me out at the time. And the biggest thing is I got so much information. The biggest thing is making friends with the people in there and getting all the information you can, because my arm turned out the way it did because I got, you know, information from people who were experienced.
This is awesome approach. Such a good example of, first of all, building awareness about something you can control, and then really educating yourself about the best options. I certainly would like to get more feedback from you, and we can do a post about it, because very often for younger patients, it's incredibly frustrating, the change of the body, and knowing that you can control your fistula look, and it's up to you and your team. That's really motivating.
Absolutely. And another tip, one more tip, if I could.
Please go ahead.
One of the nurses, I remember her coming in when I first started, and she goes, what's your numbers at for your machine? And I looked at her and I was like, I don't know. She goes, really? She goes, you need to know that. You need to memorize this machine. You need to know every number. You need to know how it runs. You need to know your weight. You need to, you know, and she kind of like lectured me a bit, but it taught me to learn and memorize everything about my machine so that I was responsible for my life. Because some of the older patients that I've noticed is they just kind of go in, let whoever put them on, and they just go to bed, or they're depressed, or they don't want to deal with it. And that's when accidents happen, you know, certain things with the dialyzer or the pressure and different things. And if, you know, I went on vacation and these people who didn't know me, they tried telling me how they were going to run my treatment, how they were going to do things. I said, no, you can't do that. Because, and come to find out, they had some rough reviews there because they weren't paying attention to their patients. So a very big tip, especially for young people, is know your machine, know your numbers. That way you can get the best treatment possible.
Excellent advice. And you were 100% ready to act on your new diagnosis and really be the most present. And for some patients who go through more hardship in the journey of accepting the illness and having energy and support to deal with it, sometimes that sense of still, like, even being on dialysis, still being in denial, still not being aware, And if you start understanding machine and the process around, it's gaining a lot of control over your own illness and your health. That's very powerful.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, so from the side of like you being receiving a straight A's on everything, managing dialysis, what was the side of dialysis or experience being ESRD patient that you felt that it was hard and it took you some time to adjust or just learn some lessons in life?
Yeah. A lot. I learned a lot. Even though I learned a lot, I also went through a lot of hardships because I didn't know anything, and I felt like my doctor, like, loved him to death at the time. You know, I have a different doctor now, but there's this idea that kind of there's this medical box, and we treat you with the medical box that we're in. You know, this nephrology dialysis type treatment, but yet I was looked at as this different, unique patient, but yet I was getting the same treatment as everyone else was. So we did a lot of treatments or research for different treatments, and I did so many different holistic alternatives as well on top of dialysis, and it burned me out. So in the end, I was doing acupuncture. I was doing herbs, which, let me tell you another thing, don't ever do herbs when you're on dialysis and when you have kidney failure, because your body cannot filter it. But I was doing so many different things. I ended up doing umbilical cord stem cells from baby girls that came from California on dry ice overnight. And my blood pressure became amazing at the time, but I burned myself out so much in the end trying to get answers and doing all this testing because we didn't know why my kidneys had failed, that we got so many different answers. I did a biopsy, and it was so exhausting that I hit a breaking point where I just said, okay, God, I'm done. I'm in so much pain. I'm ready to go. Like, if you want to take me now, I'm good with it, you know? And
Wow.
it taught me a lot, because in the end, the biopsy came out inconclusive. And it came to that point where it was like, okay, I have to accept that this is what has happened. And it's very hard, but you're going to have to accept that you may never know what really happened, and just go through life knowing that you're still living and live it to the best of your ability. And in the middle of that, I also dealt with, you know, relationship things, and, you know, that was hard as well. And the fact that I was so young, I was 20, and all my friends' lives kind of were still going, and mine felt like it stopped. I mean, I literally had to quit all my jobs so fast because dialysis took a lot out of me. You know, when I that was probably one of the hardest things, is that I had to quit all my jobs. And when I was on dialysis, when it was very hard treatments at times, and I would have to go home and rest, and then I would take that in between day to rest, to get enough, you know, gall to get up and go to the next treatment the day after that. It was a constant cycle of just having this mentality of survival, you know. And I think too, for me, you realize if you've missed this treatment, you might not make it to the next one, because that was another hardship, is going to dialysis. I gained like a ton of grandparents, it felt like, you know. But at the same time, you make friends with those people, and then you go back and they're not there sometimes. That's a very big hardship going into dialysis, is realizing that it's a life and death situation at times, and those people don't have the same mentality as you, and sometimes they do pass away. You know, it's very hard. And so there's so many different elements, and dialysis is not, I put it this way, it keeps you alive to get to your transplant. And then there's some people where they are amazing, to where I know people who have been on it for 30 years and they're like, it's not that bad. Like, I do my job all the time, and I do my my treatment, and then I'm back at my job. You know, I mean, it's different for everybody. And so I think just getting, you know, different people's perspectives helps you get through those hardships. You learn so much from other people because it's a very hard life. I feel like a lot of people tone it down when they want to talk about this stuff because they don't want to seem ungrateful when they do get out of there. But it's a very hard life. It takes a lot out of you, and it takes a lot of mental strength to get through that. And I think one of the biggest things for me is I look at other people and I say, I could have had it worse. My life is not as bad as how some people's have been. I'm blessed. Even though it felt like I went through some of the worst things, there's always somebody out there who's had it worse than you.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. I think it's so important to share this honest experience that some people may not able to express. And you said it so well that there are so many aspects of hardship that you never prepared for. And even in a process of that, other things may come up, like seeing someone else passing or someone hospitalized that you've been close to. That could totally change the way how you feel about yourself and your own future.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
So you mentioned something, first of all, like listening to you, I can certainly hear like you're type A, you always want to know everything, want to manage everything, want to do the best, like 120%, you know, work result. But as you said, you have to justify certain things based on your diagnosis and your energy level. So how was it for you to pause in some of these activities, even you physically you cannot do it, but you have that mind that makes you just keep going? How was it for you to realize your boundaries and limits?
Yeah, it took me a while. I will have to say that, is I still tried to push it at times. I was very involved in my church and like everything. I was working all the time and I was working out all the time. And so I think for about 8 months straight, I was getting about 3 hours of sleep a night, and just going. And so when I realized I couldn't do that anymore, it was really hard. I had to give up singing in the choir, and I still tried, you know, one thing that I learned is I had to balance. And so I'm also part of a cappella group in our church, and it's our older girl group and our younger girl group that came together, and I would make it when I could, and if I couldn't, they understood. And so it was one of those things where after a while, even if your mind wants to do it, my body was like, no, you can't. And so I had to learn to listen to that, because I was always going and just fast paced and never resting. And finally, it was my body that really made me stop. And when I stopped, it actually helped me enjoy the littler things in life. And like I said, it was very hard because I felt like my friends kept going. You feel very left out. You feel like you're missing out. You lose those connections at times. But in the end, like, you can't get angry at that stuff because life is life and it's not anybody's fault. It's just life, you know? And so when you come to this realization that you have to learn a balance and you have to pick things that you can still do and give up the other things and kind of set it in your mind that I'll get back to that one day. And even after transplant, I learned that I couldn't just jump back into all those things again. Even to this day, I'm still not back in the choir, and it's been 4 years, you know? So it's one of those things where you have to choose your battles, and I still overdo it sometimes. Like I've done a workout one time, an hour, really intense HIIT workout, and my body let me know you overdid it. And you have to learn those limits. Sometimes I'm still learning my limits, but you learn your limits, you learn your balance, and you realize incrementally you can get back to things or you don't get back to those things. It was just one of those things at the time where I had to learn what I could and couldn't do, and I had to learn to accept it. And sometimes I had to learn the hard way, and sometimes I got to that point where it was like, okay, I can't do this today, and I'm gonna have to be okay with it, and so is these other people if other people are involved.
Yeah, this is incredible. And certainly it's so unique to hear something from you, like sounds like you overachiever and you want to support others, and you, if you commit, you always going to show up. And this is such a hardship sometimes managing those priorities. And
Yes.
I wonder, how did you choose the language? I think that might be a good example for some of our audience who might have some commitments, they feeling they might not able to hold longer. How would you select the language, or how would you speak to people about your limits and that some of the things you need to give up?
Ooh. Well, I would definitely say if they're like me, which not everybody is like me, but you definitely have to learn your limits. So it's almost like a trial and error thing. You have to see what you're able to do. Sometimes you might hurt yourself physically or mentally. You might, especially if you critique yourself and you're your biggest critic, you're gonna have those moments where you're really hard on yourself when you realize you can't do them anymore, but then you have to come back down and tell yourself, you know what, no, I will get back to that one day. And you just have to accept at the moment that you might not be strong enough, physically, not mentally. That's the biggest thing. Everybody needs to realize that mentally you are strong enough to do something, and it's not your fault if physically you can't do it at the moment. And then you have to tell yourself, one day when I'm better, I'll be able to get back to this. And sometimes it's a buildup. Maybe people are able to do that. I know of someone who was, they would talk about him in dialysis. Oh, he was a person who would get off treatment and be like, hey, I'm going to go run a 5K right now. And I was just like, I would feel embarrassed at times because I'm like, I'm 20 years old and I can't even do that. But I learned that everybody's different and we're all individuals and we all deal with life and our physical bodies differently. And my body couldn't handle that. And so you kind of learn what your body can handle. And I think sometimes you have to kind of learn those limits, and you might hurt yourself a little bit. But in the end, you learn, yes, I can do that. No, I can't do that. And then you learn to kind of tell other people, I can't do that right now, but one day I will. Or, yeah, I think I'm up to it tonight. You kind of have to weigh your options and don't be so hard on yourself if you can't.
Awesome advice. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I think it's not easy for sure to go through that period of life and letting things go. But this is essential for managing your health and have the right priorities.
Yes.
So specifically on personal life, emotions and relationship, when you were on dialysis, what have you realized as a dialysis patient you have may change the way how you explain yourself to your partner when you're dating, or how would you approach dating at that time?
So I was actually in a relationship when I was diagnosed, but we were both very, very young. So at the time, I would have to say it was kind of just like this immature relationship. So it wasn't a big deal to walk away. I broke up with him. And I think a big deal, like I told you before, life is not a Hallmark movie. So relationships on dialysis is not easy. But one thing that I did learn was that, through dialysis, through my diagnosis, and even through transplant, the kidney stuff is not an issue for these people. And so that's one big thing that I want to give a huge moment for, is because I feel like when I went through all this stuff, I was like, well, who's going to want somebody that has scars and has been through all of these issues and has these issues? And what I realized is that all my boyfriends did not care about it. They're like, oh, scars are cool and they're, it's fine. And, all these potential issues, it's fine. That's not an issue. Our issues have never been because of the kidney problems. It's been more of different religion problems or different deal breakers. It's never been the kidney issue. And I think that that's something that's important to talk about for people, because I don't ever want somebody to think, oh, nobody's going to love you because of your scars or what you've been through. If anything, all my boyfriends have admired me for what I've been through. Well, the boyfriend at the time when I was diagnosed was just more immature. Like, I was stronger than him. I remember he was too scared to meet my parents because we were in a newer relationship. I'll just be honest. I don't have a problem being honest about this if you don't care.
Love to hear the details, certainly.
Yeah.
Very curious.
Yeah. So, we were both 19 when we started talking, and I had just turned 20 a few months before I was diagnosed. So I was 20 and he was about to turn 20 when I was diagnosed. And it took him 4 days to come to the hospital. And my ex-boyfriend before him came and saw me at the hospital more than he did.
Like, wow, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah. He was too much of a scaredy cat. I don't want to say coward, that's mean, but he was too much of a scaredy cat to meet my parents, that it took him 4 days and my mom's coaxing to come see me at the hospital. And when he did, I had already had the port put in my chest. I had already started dialysis, and he walked in and he sat on the edge of my bed and he started crying. And I was the one fighting for my life. And I'm just patting him on the back like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to die. It's fine.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
So that
Right.
was like a moment where it was like, this is not going to work. Like, I need someone that's going to support me and be strong for me, you know? So the kidney issue wasn't an issue. It was the fact of like the mentality of him and the strength of him and just the immaturity, I guess you could say. It was just one of those things where we were really young and it was just kind of fresh. And we had more of like this really cool friendship relationship type of relationship. So it wasn't like we were heartbroken. And it was kind of like he was focusing on college and his career, and I was just diagnosed and I was fighting for my life. So it wasn't like we didn't part with hard feelings. Like we would be able to be really cool with each other if we saw each other, you know. It was one of those things.
Well, and I think it's might be important also for you. You had that power and strength to overcome this, because it's certainly unpleasant knowing that someone you have been close with wouldn't be able to process things when you were processing it, and it was way harder for you to process it. That the biggest part sometimes is not about other people not accepting someone who going through hardness or having scars. It's really about the personal journey of self-acceptance and being less criticizing about physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is so important to speak about this. And how was your approach to your own body and your own diagnosis, that you knew that you're good, like you still have same quality of Calah, you just have a diagnosis that you're dealing with, but the rest of things are just who you are, and relationship are really about your personality than anything else?
Yeah. Okay. That is a great question. I love that question. Yeah, because you have to love yourself if you're going to be able to let somebody else love you, and vice versa as well. And so I was working out a lot. Right before I was diagnosed, I was getting some muscle, different things. And then when I was diagnosed, I'm almost 5'9". And so I went down to 110 pounds. That's very skinny. And I had been teased for being skinny my whole life. So when you get even skinnier, it takes a huge toll on your self-confidence, and then I always had extremely long hair. We're talking middle of my thigh, never cut it. And then when I started all these meds and all these different things, I started losing my hair. And then I never had acne in my life, and I started getting acne and just all these different things. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, and I remember, and it's interesting that you talk about, your relationship with yourself. I remember, my hairline, and I have a big forehead, but imagine losing your hair all the way back to here. I mean, I lost my hairline, everything. And I remember telling God, and I had an angry moment. I mean, an angry prayer to where I said, I will die with my hair before I go, any more bald. And I told the Lord, I said, I will take myself off this machine if you don't let my hair start growing back. And my hair started growing back. And I still deal with hair loss and different things. But, I've had my hair prayed over, and out of all the physical issues, out of all the pain, the hair was the thing that broke me the most, because I've never cut my hair. I've never trimmed it, nothing. And so it was so heartbreaking for me. And still at times it's still very hard for me, but there's also alternatives called extensions, you know. I bought extensions, you know, so when I want to have fabulous hair, I have extensions. But something else that's crazy is I had straight hair. And when my hair started growing back in, this is what I got. I got wavy hair, you know? So you learn to kind of take the new things that happen in life and you just embrace it. I mean, I remember when it first started getting wavy, my cousin looked at me and she goes, you know what? I love the wavy hair because it goes with your sassy personality and attitude, you know? And so you kind of learn to start loving the new things of you because the old things are going away. And at times it's very weird, but I remember going through transplant, all these different changes, and I felt like I was mourning the loss of someone. And I deal with death pretty well. I mean, I'm not saying that in a weird way. I'm just saying, like, typically I do okay with death, but I felt like I was dealing with a death, and it was like insane how I was mourning the loss of my old self. And it took me a while to kind of get through that. And now I'm like, wow, I've worked really hard on my skincare. I've you know, got a huge skincare routine. I, you know, learned how to deal with my alopecia due to my meds. You know, extensions are an option, you know, taking certain medications or vitamins to help your hair, whatever. It's such an important role in who I am today, learning to accept the new person so that I can love myself, so that when it comes time, I can be able to love somebody else as well. Because if I don't love myself, then I'm not going to be able to love somebody else properly.
That's incredible. Like, I really like how you explained that there were all these characteristics that you associated yourself, your beauty, your personality with. And I can totally relate to hair. I always had long hair. Year ago, I cut it. Now I'm like growing it back and I'm so happy. But I totally can relate about sometimes some aspects of our body just so important to us. And having experiencing change, it's just like losing part of your personality, not having them. But that doesn't need to be this way. It's important to understand what you can do about it. And as you said, there are all the options like extension, better skincare routine, and sometimes just given time. Environment and media, everything focusing so much about physicality of our body, about our look. It's even harder. It's like there is time to fight for life, and but it's like, I need to look certain way. Come on.
And that's another thing too, is the weight gain. I've gained 40 pounds since transplant. I'm the heaviest I've ever weighed. But when people look at me, they go, oh my gosh, like you look normal, like you look healthy now. And I've gained stretch marks and more different things that I never had before. And my scars, you know, I always thought, oh, I'm going to hate my scars. I love every single one of my scars because first off, it's a tattoo with a better story. You know, that's how I feel about them. They're my tattoos, you know, and when I see them, like I said, at the time of going through all the hardships, I would put myself in the third person, like, it's not happening to you. It's not happening to you. You're fine. Like, that's how I would get through the pain and different things. But when I look at my scars, I'm like, no, girl, that was you. You went through that. You fought through that. You survived that. And now you're thriving, you know? So for me, the weight gain, sometimes it's hard to accept, you know, when your clothes don't fit the same and different things. But when I look at it, I'm like, no, I'm actually healthy. Like, my curves have actually gotten better and different things, you know. So you learn to be really proud of what your body was able to do and survive.
Well said. Yeah, this is the most important, to be happy after we went through. And it's so inspiring also knowing that everything about your body, it's your own story, and you deserve all the beautiful outcomes and amazing life you have, to have freedom to do whatever you want without thinking about dialysis.
Yes, absolutely.
Certainly, I want to hear way more details about your grandma. How does it feel like when your grandma step in and donate organ to you, and how were you able to connect more emotionally with?
I feel like we've always been close because we're similar. Maybe it's the Polish side of us coming out. We're very stubborn, say it like it is, black and white type of people. You know, we just kind of are bold personalities. So I always kind of call us two peas in a pod. Now we are a little different in some areas, but we were always pretty close. Even though she lived further away, we'd talk here and there, but we also just lived our lives, and we understood, hey, I live my life, you live yours, and when we get together, we connect. So when she donated to me, I remember going in for pre-op with her and different things, and when people were looking at our paperwork, I remember the front desk girl goes, oh, you're signing in for surgery. And she's like looking at our paperwork, and she like looked up at us and looked back at the paperwork, looked up at us, and she goes, wait a second. She goes, you're giving to her, not her giving to you. I was like, yeah, she's giving to me. And so many people were realizing that she was giving me her kidney and not me saving her life. And they would just start crying. I mean, it was like 5:30 in the morning, and all these nurses are just like crying, you know? And so it was a crazy journey. And, you know, she could have, at that moment where they put the head cap on her and we're about to put her out, she could have made that decision to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not ready for it. And she went through it like nobody's business. I mean, I call her that cool hip grandma, because, you know, she used to ride around on a 4-wheeler, you know, and she just turned 70 in June, you know, and she gets around great. I mean, she barely has any gray hair. She looks fabulous. You know, she had her own company to where she would do alteration. She's just a go-getter, you know, and I remember her telling me, she was like, well, I'm going to do the testing. And I didn't think anything of it. I just kind of lived my life. And I felt like something was around the corner. I remember, I think it was around August of 2017. I kind of had a breakthrough in some things. And I kind of just felt like a miracle was about to happen. And a few weeks after that is when my grandma called me. And I still remember, my team called me and said, hey, we need you to come down here to do something. And I was like, okay, what? They're like, well, draw some blood. And I thought, that's so weird, because dialysis always draws the blood. But I said, okay. So I went down there, and the day after that, she called me and she was like, I just want to let you know, like, I've been down here doing all the testing, and I saw you leave. They sneaked me in right after you, and they mixed our blood together, and I'm your match. And so, it's crazy. I don't know. I feel like everybody feels like they have to repay, you know, and one big thing that they taught us is that you don't have to give your donor a gift all the time, and you don't have to do this and do that. And I knew from the beginning, the best way that I could repay my grandma is to live my best, healthiest life that I could possibly. And that would repay her. And it wouldn't be really repaying, you know, you cannot repay something that's priceless, but it would be the best thing that I could do possible. And so she's so selfless, and the fact that she had that crazy idea at her age to do that is such a blessing. But I also think it's such a huge deal that she did do it, because it teaches so many people her age that it's possible for them to be donors as well.
Yeah, this is such a miracle and so beautiful. Oh my God, listening all these details, just like can picture like her energy. You're so lucky to have this amazing person to be a grandma.
Yeah.
You said something so important, that certainly organ donation is that very difficult process in the United States or anywhere else tend to be hard to address, like asking someone to become organ donor. And when someone step in, it has to be that very healthy individual. And sometimes we just always have this assumption it should be someone young.
Right.
And so having someone older who's still healthy and can donate could certainly be a good alternative.
Yeah, absolutely.
How was your journey before your grandma stepped in to be your donor? Have you been working on your campaign? Have you had the opportunity to do like a donor party or donor conversation with some of your close friends and family members?
Yeah, so I remember my physician's assistant kind of telling me, get on Facebook, start telling people. you know, and I felt like a little uncomfortable about it. I don't know. There was something about it that made me feel a little uneasy about it. And that's kind of sad because I've seen many people just put it out there on t-shirts, cars, Facebook, and random people will donate, you know? And I remember I had somebody who kind of was with me from the beginning of the journey, and it was my friend that I've grown up with and her mom. And her mom went to the seminar because our team requires that you do a seminar to learn all about it, the pros and cons, everything, the ins and outs. They came to the seminar to learn about it. My cousin did, my parents did, multiple people came to kind of find out about it with me. And they both looked into it. And I remember my friend, she was 19 at the time. She's a year younger than me. She was 19 at the time, and she said, I sent in my papers and I'm going to be looking. And something about it just made me feel uneasy about it, because I was like, I don't ever want anything to happen to her. She's just about ready to start her life too. You know, I don't know. There was just something off about it to me. And so I feel like I didn't really campaign for it. I feel like I campaigned for more people than I did for myself, you know? It was just kind of like a mental block for me. And then I had some mental breakthroughs really in my spiritual walk with God. And then I felt my miracle coming, and that's when my grandma called me. So it's kind of a weird thing for me. I didn't really campaign for myself, but I will tell you, after I went through all that I went through, I went to college 7 months post. But I started doing research before that. I think I was about 4 months post when I went and got a tour at a place. And I told my recruiter at the time, I told her my story, and it encouraged her and it inspired her. And she ended up donating to a single father of 3. Yeah, she gave her kidney to him. And they're, I think, almost 2 years post now, close to that. So my story, campaigning, you know, if I failed at anything, it was campaigning for myself. But really telling my story has helped others really reach out and help other people as well. And she's like, oh, I hear you can donate a liver, part of your liver too, you know? So she's like, I'm looking into that as well, if I can do that, you know? So it was kind of crazy how my story inspired her to donate to somebody else.
Yeah, this is so unique, certainly with people who are in a position in life and spiritually and mentally they are in that place to donate. That could change the course of their life, donating. And I interviewed a number of people who donated to strangers, and it was about them just stepping in and saving someone's life. Sometimes even not about that person and in which life situation they are, just like knowing that they have a power to save someone, and that person can do anything what they want, but just need to accept the gift. And it's amazing, so selfless how many organ donors just have that mindset. So thanks for inspiring people and helping others to go through sometimes those very hard conversations. As you said, it's not easy to advocate for yourself. And for all the time I had with doing interviews with kidney patient, I only know one patient who was 100% on self-advocating and really asking about kidney. And majority patients have the hardest time even bringing up the conversation, feeling that too selfish or just, and I think it's so important to keep sharing more awareness and openness about it, because very often people don't donate or don't get tested because they just don't know enough about it, or don't know enough about the struggles of person who's on dialysis. So if you give advice to your younger self when you were, pre-dialysis, and after all the journey you had through the exploring your own life, conversation with God, conversation with your grandma before and post organ donation, what kind of advice would you give yourself to living life and being more mindful?
So first off, I would never change what I went through, but if I could give advice to my younger self, it would be, don't ignore symptoms. It's okay to go to the doctor and get checked out. Because then you might not deal with the consequences of today, and I'm not saying that I don't appreciate this life. I appreciate my life so much, and I don't take it for granted, but there are gonna be lifelong consequences because of anti-rejection medications and different things. And so my biggest, and I can't say that I regret it, because I don't ever want to say I regret what I've been through. It changed me so much. Sorry, my phone is glitching, but I don't ever want to say I regret it, you know, because I changed into the strong person that I am. But I don't ever want somebody to go through what I went through. It's unexplainable, honestly. And like I said, you don't know anything about it until you really personally go through it. But you don't want people to personally go through it. You do not want it to become personal to people. So the biggest advice is to really, if you got something going on, like, talk to somebody and maybe have them encourage you to go to the doctor if you're really against it. Definitely don't ignore symptoms. That is one of my biggest issues, because I could have caught it early on and it could have been a different outcome for me. And I don't ever want it to sound like, you know, I would take it back, because I would never take it back. But it could have been different. It could have been easier. It could have been avoided. And so don't ever ignore symptoms.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all your experiences, and it was amazing to learn about how did you manage your life on dialysis, which is, I'm sure anyone in our audience, if you have questions to Calah about fistula management, about different aspects of self-care, Calah will be open to chat with you. And if you need any tips how to work on your campaign for organ donation, here's your girl. She has amazing voice and she can help you to tailor your message.
Yes, always reach out to me on Instagram. I feel like I've had a lot of great connections through Instagram, meeting different people through here, and I love it because it's a big kidney community and we can always come together and learn from each other.
What's the best account to reach out to you?
My name, CALAH _ Elizabeth, ELISABETH is my Instagram.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to list it in the description of the podcast as well.
Great. Thank you so much. I loved meeting you again. And hopefully when you're in the area, let me know and we can actually meet up.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks so much for staying with us. And if you liked our channel, make sure to subscribe to us on Facebook, Spotify, and iTunes podcast.